Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's such a pleasure today to be here with Rob Fredericks, the Executive Director of the Santa Barbara Housing Authority. And Rob, we have so much to talk about with the latest news going on with Section 8 vouchers, but also all the incredible work you and the Housing Authority are doing in this community. How are you today, Rob?
Doing well, thanks. Even with all the craziness at the federal level and just, yeah, trying to do as best I can.
Yes, well, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show because you're such a hero in the community in terms of everything you do, and you're so smart on all these housing issues. So I always learn something, and I know the audience does. Let's dive right in and just talk about Section 8 vouchers. I wrote a story earlier in this week. It's gotten a lot of attention, and I thought we could just kind of explain what's happening here in a little more detail. But there's basically a halt in the issuance of Section 8 vouchers. And
Yeah.
what this means is there will be no new ones that are given out. There's something like 7,700 people on a waiting list, and there's a huge demand for these vouchers to serve low income individuals. What's happening, Rob? What does this mean when the Housing Authority is not issuing vouchers anymore?
Yeah, so we're allocated about 2,600 regular vouchers from the federal government for our community to issue to income eligible households to assist with their rent because rents are too high for low income households to afford to live where they work, to live in their community, for seniors on fixed incomes or disabled households to afford a place to call home. So this rental assistance is key for them to help stay in the Santa Barbara community. And unfortunately, even though we're allocated a specific number of vouchers, the amount of funding that Congress allocates in the HUD budget for the voucher program isn't always enough to take care of those housing assistance payments long term, uh, because it's especially in high cost areas like Santa Barbara where you have ever increasing rents don't go down over the long term, they just increase, and that just puts more pressure on taking the available resources that we have to put into the voucher program. So we're not allowed to just keep issuing vouchers. We have to balance what we predict will be available with funding with the amount of vouchers that we have. And so we're looking at a shortfall for this year, and it's not unusual. I think the media and the general public is rightfully has a lot of concern recently with everything that is going on at the federal level, with cuts across many different departments affecting nonprofits around the country. But this shortfall issue isn't really a function of the current administration. Many authorities were in shortfall before the current administration took over, including the County of Santa Barbara Housing Authority, San Diego Housing Commission, Housing Authority of the City of LA. A lot of housing authorities have been in shortfall, and we've been through this ourselves before this time. Back when the Budget Control Act of 2011 caused sequestration, that put many housing authorities and ours into shortfall, where we had to pause issuing any vouchers that were allocated to our agency. And then, as recently as 2017, we had to put another pause because of an outlook of shortfall funding. So it's not something new. It's not our first rodeo, and I just want to put that out to the community that it's. I don't view this as a function of what's going on currently in Washington on this voucher shortfall. It's more of a systemic issue on the voucher program. California, through all the housing authorities across California, is allocated about 360 vouchers to help 360,000 vouchers to help low-income families. But there's not enough funding to issue all those vouchers. So they don't statewide, only about 318,000 of the 360,000 are leased up. That means 40,000 families are being left unserved. And that's because there's not enough money to serve all those vouchers that are allocated to the state. It's something that has to be looked at, and it's a costly program, but it's a program that helps with family choice to be able to choose where they want to live in the private market. They don't have to live in our housing units, even though I think our housing units are better than the private market a lot of times. But they get with the voucher, they get their choice to live where they want to live in the private market. And this is a program that was established in 1972 under the Nixon administration, the voucher program. So it's been a long-standing program to help low-income families, seniors, and disabled individuals be able to afford a place to call home, and it actually helps lift people out of poverty. So it's had good bipartisan support over the years. This program, I don't see it going away. Even in the continuing resolution, the year-long continuing resolution that was just passed a couple of weeks ago, that takes care of the rest of the year until September 30th. The HUD budget was increased for the voucher program. It just wasn't increased enough to take care of projected shortfalls. So that's
So,
why agencies need to manage and turn off the valve on issuing vouchers.
right. So we'd be in this situation regardless of who was in the White House at the moment. Is that correct? But there is an air
Well,
of fear and worry with what's going on with cuts to federal funding in general. Is that accurate?
that is accurate. Yeah, yeah. Now, there's other things to worry about um, with our rental assistance programs and affordable housing with the current administration that they've indicated moving forward. We're going to have to look at, they're looking at time limits for families on the voucher program. Aside from seniors and disabled,
Hmm.
if you're a working family, there's indications that they're going to be looking at placing time limits, that you only get the voucher assistance for a certain period of time, and then it goes to somebody else, which, I can see that the theory of that, but in practicality, in like a community like Santa Barbara, just because you have a housing assistance for a few years and all of a sudden you lose it doesn't mean you're paid more than in your current job to afford the crushingly high rents in Santa Barbara. People, even the working families that aren't paid enough of an income, a wage, they're always going to need housing assistance to live in the community they serve.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. My father is on a Section 8 voucher, and we got that letter, and so I was like, oh, okay, and I kind of manage his process through all of that. It's a very
Yeah.
scary letter, right? You're like, whoa, what does this mean? You got to read it a few times and make
Yeah,
sure.
and I tried to bold, the sections to really make it clear that this isn't affecting people who are currently leased up with assistance. Our job one is to ensure that your housing is secure. We just can't help people that have been languishing on the waiting list far too long already. They're going to have to wait longer, is at the
Yeah.
end of the
Yeah,
day.
no, the letter was well stated. Help us understand Section 8 vouchers, and it's not even called Section 8 anymore. I guess it
Right.
has a new name, but that's kind of historically how we've referred to it as. So
Yeah.
you can be a family, you can be a senior, you could be someone with disability,
Yeah.
and you you only pay up to 30% of your income, and then
Typically, it's about 30% of your income that you pay for to the landlord for rent, and then the housing assistance payments from the housing authority from that voucher that people have uh, pays the remainder of that rent, that balance,
right.
which is the vast majority of the rent. The housing authority pays that with the voucher program. And the HUD, and that's based on the HUD standard of 30% of your income, no more than 30% of your income should go towards housing costs. If you're paying more than that, you're rent burdened, and meaning you're giving up other necessities of life just to be able to keep a roof over your head. And you know as well as I do, Josh, that far too many people are paying way more than 30% of their income for rent because they don't have they're not fortunate enough to have voucher assistance. They have to make it on their own, so they end up paying 50% of their wages for housing costs, and it's crushing families. At a certain point they give up and they leave the community. So
So
yeah.
the property owner, they get their full market value rent. It's just that they get it from different sources. That's correct, right? They're not accepting a lower amount out of the kindness of Earth's reflection, or is there more nuance to that?
Well, it is more nuanced. We have a set payment standard
Mhm.
um, that we're allowed to pay landlords on the total contract rent, the housing assistance payment from us, and the tenant rent can be no more than this payment standard that's dictated by HUD. And for example, our current payment standard for a studio is 20 um, $2,500 a month, which is sounds pretty high,
Mhm.
but studios are even going for like on the market $2,900 a month. Our one bedrooms, our payment standard is $2,900 a month. And we're seeing rents at over $3,000 a month. So we have a lot of landlords that are accepting a, a, a somewhat reduced amount of rent from what they could get on the open market by accepting a voucher holder. You know, you get guarantees with us though. You have guaranteed that rent's guaranteed from the housing authority on time every
Uh,
month. We have security deposit guarantees, damage guarantees that provides a comfort level to the landlord community that they don't get on the open market. So, you know, this it's a program that is really super important to have a good partnership with the landlord community because they don't have to um, necessarily take a voucher holder. They can't discriminate anymore based on state law. They can't say, well, because you're a voucher holder, I'm not allowing you to rent here. But, you know, there's such a high demand that they could easily um, ask for rent higher than the payment standard and get it, and that would preclude them from accepting a voucher holder.
yeah. There's many ways to have certain applications at the top of the file than others with so
Right.
much demand that's out there for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, and so the Section 8 voucher, how does that differ from when we hear about these projects that the housing authority is working on, where the housing authority is building a development? Can that same person who's paying up to 30% of their rent and getting federal assistance, and together they're paying close to or the actual market rent, could they live in one of your units, or this is like another tier, separate tier for a different kind of person in the community?
No, a voucher can live in one of our development. Like the main driver of funding for our new developments that we build for affordable housing is the low income housing tax credit program. That's where we apply to the state for tax credits that pay for about 70 to 80% of the hard construction costs. Um, those tax credits do. But we receive those credits, but because we're a government agency, we don't have a tax liability. So we have to form these limited partnerships to bring in a private equity investor as a limited partner that, and those partners have a tax liability. They're typically very large institutional investors with a tax liability. They're banks like U.S. Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. They're typical tax credit investors in these projects, or large insurance companies like Nationwide Insurance. They invest because they have a tax liability. So it's a program. That program was meant to replace public housing funding that was a direct issuance of funding to housing authorities to build public housing after the 1937 Housing Act. But that was kind of a failed model because public housing was never funded enough by Congress either. And you ended up having these very large structures that were kind of just warehouses for the poor. They weren't well maintained. They weren't very nice. When you think public housing, you're thinking Cabrini Green in Chicago or Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis, these big, ugly towers. It was never our model of public housing. We always did much better with providing it. But Congress got rid of public housing. They created the tax credit program to be the new investment vehicle, to bring in private investment into affordable housing. So we have those developments. Long story short, these tax credit developments can and do utilize the voucher program for subsidizing the rents after they're built.
Right. So someone with a Section 8 voucher can live in these units. Rob, they forget the exact number, 7,700, 7,300 people on the waiting list. Does that mean that there are that many people in Santa Barbara who qualify for a Section 8 voucher who can't find a space? Or what does that number mean?
No, that's everybody on the wait list, right?
Uh-huh.
Anybody anywhere in the world can go online right now. If we were open for that wait list, we're not currently accepting
So they
applications.
put their name down.
Right, they can put their name down, give some basic information like their family size, how much income they have, and where they currently live. So we have a lot of people. Part of that 7,000 are people who live in New York that have family, or they previously lived in Santa Barbara. They want to come back, so they apply and get on our waiting list. So we have people from all over the state, all over the country applying in. The majority of that 7,700 people on the waiting list is right here in Santa Barbara County, though. There are people who live or work in Santa Barbara that need an affordable place to call home.
Okay.
But to be clear, that it doesn't just include people on the South Coast or Santa Barbara County. People can apply from wherever they are.
Right.
There, but we do have a local preference as well that you can apply, but unless you're currently living or working on the South Coast of Santa Barbara County, you will never go to the top of the list until we deplete that list of people who live or work first on the south coast of Santa Barbara County. That's because the vouchers we're allocated are not meant to import people in need from out of the community. They're meant to help the people who are in the community now.
So what impact do you think this will have on people who need a Section 8 voucher? You're halting it, or I think the term is pausing it.
Mhm.
There's obviously, I mean, people have to wait years as it is, right? Unless you're at
Yeah,
the top. But
yeah.
Well, as a practical matter, what does this mean if, for families who are on that list? They're just going to have to wait longer, or what does that mean?
That is it. They're going to have to wait longer. If you're at the top of the list right now, rather than us being able to pull your name off the waiting list, do a full income review, which is very intrusive. When we pull someone from the wait list, we have to verify all sources of income, third-party verifications. It's for program integrity. We don't like having to do it, but having to be as invasive as we are, but
Yeah.
it's a requirement, and that's something that the community would demand as well. Like, ensure the people who are getting assisted are ones who truly need the assistance. So we do the income qualification, and we would then issue them a voucher to go find a place to live, whether it's with a private landlord or if we have a vacancy and they want to rent from us, they can. Um, but those people that are at the top of the list, they're going to have to wait probably until next year until we can turn that tap back on when the number of vouchers leased slowly drops down to equilibrium to where we can begin issuing vouchers again is what it means. Now we do have some special purpose vouchers in a separate funding bucket that HUD is allowing us to continue to issue. Those are like the VASH vouchers for Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing,
Yeah.
and non-elderly disabled vouchers. They're allowing us to continue to issue those, but we just can't from our regular voucher program.
The bottom line here with this is you get a certain amount of funding, and because rents are much higher in Santa Barbara,
Yeah.
um, and rents continue to go up as we've been talking about as a
Yeah.
city, 10% a year, probably,
Yeah.
maybe more if it's a, new tenancy or something. But there's only a fixed amount of money. So with rents so high, that limits the number of vouchers you can give because you wouldn't want to be in a situation where you're giving a whole bunch of vouchers out, but then you run out of money. So the people who get them have to be kept sort of whole. And I guess in other communities, wherever those are, where rents are lower, they might be able to issue more vouchers, perhaps.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
So, so what's the long-term solution here, Rob? Because rents are not going to get any lower, right? I mean, I know the city's talking about various rent protections, tenant protections, forms
Mhm.
of rent stabilization, right to return. There's a number of packages there. But rents are continuing to go up, and probably federal funding's not going to go up at the same rate. What's the
Right.
community going to look like in the next few years?
Yeah, it's a tough thing, and like I say, with this shortfall, this pause is not new. I think it's something that's going to continue to be more frequent. The whole entire country is in a housing crisis. We have a shortage of over 7 million homes affordable and available to low income households. 7 million, a shortage of 7 million homes. A majority of that's right here in California, that shortage. And that's the same thing with Santa Barbara. If we had more supply, things were more in balance, we probably wouldn't have this extreme pressure, upward pressure on rents.
Hmm.
But I think it's a fact of life that we're going to have to deal with. But we're going, doesn't mean we give up and we throw in the towel and say we can't do it, we're giving up. That's why we're continuing to develop where we can more affordable housing opportunities and help who we can at the time. It's not enough. I wish there was a change in federal priorities on fund because housing is so foundational to local communities that they would actually allocate more funding for affordable housing to communities. I think you've heard me say it over and over again in different forums that, I wish that housing was not such a commodity that I believe affordable housing is a basic human right, and it shouldn't be treated as such a commodity. We should, rather than having all this money that's being saved with through the Doge process. I wish they would put more of that money towards local communities for basic human needs, but I
Yeah.
don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. I think we're not going to go there in the Doge thing 'cause that's a all day forever
Right.
criticism podcast there. But last thing on this, the people who live these in these who use these Section 8 vouchers, um, I mean, if they didn't have those, I mean, we're talking about potentially homelessness or people living in their cars or having to live somewhere else, family if it's possible. Um, these Section 8 vouchers are not, and I say this because I'm a journalist. I get all kinds of email from people who are just terrible people who say terrible things. These are not, I mean, not giveaways. I mean, these are serving the people most in need. And if we didn't give these vouchers, people would be impacted far worse because these people would be homeless probably to some degree, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely. We've lifted and people out of homelessness with these vouchers. We've prevented homelessness with seniors that find themselves on fixed income, surviving on Social Security and Social Security disability, and people who are disabled where they can't physically work, or adults with developmental disabilities. We help them as well. But so the vast majority of the people we serve on the voucher program, I was looking at some of our statistics, are either they're seniors on fixed incomes that have been part of this community, working part of this community, or they're disabled, uh, or they're working families. They're just not paid enough to afford the rent. So if they weren't paid enough, they would probably be homeless
yeah.
if they were not paid enough and they didn't have the vouchers. So the voucher program is extremely important to local communities. That's one of the reasons why I don't see it going away. I think there's a realization in every single community across the nation how much this program really does help and helps lift families out of poverty.
That's great. Well, keep up the good work there and the fight, and hopefully a year from now, things are a much better situation for not only the city but the county and statewide.
I hope.
Rob, let's talk about some of the other projects going on in the community. I spill a lot of ink, as we used to say when we actually printed newspapers, but I've published a lot of words on your projects. Or, I love when you go speak to the council publicly. I want to say I love one of the last times you spoke. You really let them have it. You were honest. You said, this is not fair. We need to do more. I'm summarizing, but you were
Yeah.
blunt, and it was great. But what are some of the successes, some of the things you're working on in this community? I'll start with what I covered. It was a big celebration, the Bella Vista project over there. What's going on with that, and why is that so important?
Yeah, that's our newest development that's under construction right now. We were able to cobble together all the funding stacks. The city gave a big amount of money for that project. We got the tax credits and putting it all together with a conventional loan to fill the gap and housing authority funds. We're able to fund that development, and that'll create 48 new large family units.
Mm.
Large families meaning 25% of the units that of the 48 are three bedrooms. And then another good portion are two bedrooms. So they're not just small studios serving special needs populations like we have most recently in the past. This one is focusing on families with children to house here. And, that's one of the reasons I received some criticism or read some criticism in social media elsewhere on the cost of this project being over $1 million per unit. Well, the reason, there's a lot of reasons why, yes, cost to build. affordable housing is very expensive. That's one of the reasons why I do wish for the old days of HUD just giving housing authority a check to go out and build or acquire housing. Now with the tax credit program, all these regulations and soft costs, it's very expensive, a lot of brain damage. And but one of the, factors of the cost of that site is the site characteristics, the grade change. It's a weird lot that's kind of a trapezoid, and to build appropriately, there's certain and provide the necessary parking for the families. It is costly, but when you look at it, because it's large family on a per bedroom basis,
Yeah.
it's actually lower cost on a per bedroom basis than our Veracruz village that was all studios,
Oh,
uh, 28 studios
oh
down
yeah.
on Street a couple of years ago. So it's because there are many more bedrooms, much more square footage that you have that cost. Also, under the funding streams we're using, we're required to pay prevailing wage, which increases your cost 25 to 30% on a project if
Mhm.
instead of just building it market rate with conventional financing. That's not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think, because and maybe it's because of just my whole orientation of thinking is wrong, but I think it's good to pay our workforce prevailing wage, right? That we're paying people who are building on the site a living wage there. So it is more costly, but that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah, and I think we need more of those larger family units because so much of the new housing that is built is geared toward smaller affordability by design. But
Yeah,
there's so much to be said about space and room, and when you have children, it just creates so much downstream effects in terms of quality of life and education. And if you have potential for affordable housing for families, that's amazing.
yeah,
So that's one of those
yeah.
great projects. Uh, you also have purchased the Quality Inn hotel over there on Delavina, and that's going to be renovated into something for the community. What's the status on that?
Yeah, Quality Inn is going to be 32 units. We're taking the existing units and adding kitchenettes and upgrading them into full studios. So there's going to be 32 studio units there. And it is going to be dedicated to people at risk of being homeless or moving from homelessness there.
Yeah.
We're going to provide all the necessary on-site supportive services and management to have it be a success. That's one of my one of one of the things I do on every development, that we're going to be a good neighbor no matter where we put our developments, that we want to actually improve the neighborhood with this use of affordable housing, not destroy it. So Quality Inn, it's going to have a massive redesign, a reskinning of the project to, and right now I like to call it faux French chateau look. It's really a sad looking building, especially right now because we already started some of the construction work on it. But it's going to be a really beautiful Spanish colonial design that the ABR really liked, having that redesign there. And the community did too. We held a couple of community meetings there and said, what would you like? Would you like us just to keep the existing design and put some lipstick on it and call it a day, or would you really like this to be fixed up? And what architectural style? And they said they really want it fixed up with a Spanish colonial design. So that's what we're doing with the red tile, S tile roofs, the smooth plaster on the walls. It's and lush landscaping, and they're going to be nice places for residents who otherwise don't have a home.
Right. And are these 30 are these residents, if how much are they allowed to pay to be there? Or what's the maximum? Is it the same formula?
30% of their income for rent. So, we do have a minimum rent that, even if you're zero income, we do ask for a minimum rent of $50 per month, but that usually they're coming with Social Security, SSDI, or some kind of
Okay.
payments that we are able to say that's part of your income, and you're going to pay 30% of your income for rent.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know that big picture, more housing, more supply is an answer
Yeah.
because the more you build, naturally rents will come down. And even if it's brand new construction, catering to high-end tech professionals who could afford 5 grand for a one bedroom or whatever, that still is good because that frees up other units, and that other people can move into, and also just more supply means more
Yeah.
options for people
I mean, to an extent, that's
to an extent.
true.
Mhm.
But Santa Barbara is such a unique place, that with not a lot of land, we're built out. We're the American Riviera, right? We're like a mini Monaco, where there's just no land available. It's very expensive. So I think the supply demand thing is rather inelastic in Santa Barbara, where we would have to build massive amounts of housing to bring the pressure down on the rents. And I think that's going to be very difficult to do. And I get criticized on the one hand by some to say, well, why aren't you building higher, building more units on a certain development? Like 15 South Hope, where we're going to be building 46 units there. It's 4 stories. And I've been criticized, why not go a couple more stories higher and build more units? Well, we're always looking for that balance of building for the community and having it compatible with the overall community. What can it support and still enhance and be a nice place to live? So
Sure.
it's really a balancing act.
Yeah, and those are pressures that obviously you feel, the council feels, the city and the county feel, depending on where the development is, because
Mhm.
if you overbuild, right, on one hand, it's more housing. On the other hand, it has incredible community impacts and on infrastructure that we may not be able to support. La Cumbre Plaza.
Hmm.
That's those aren't your projects, although maybe you'd be involved. I don't. You got the
Yeah.
Hope one, yeah. So
Yeah.
stuff like that is huge, and we're not going to open that door in this podcast, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
Behind you, Rob, I think that's the corner of Carrillo and Castillo,
It
and
is.
that serves a whole different group. And that's the great thing about the housing authority is it's not all just one thing. So, what
Right.
is the development behind you in Carrillo and Castillo, which is going to look like that one day? Who is that going to serve?
That that is the current Carrillo Castillo commuter lot that the city has agreed to donate to us to build and to target the moderate income households. So those that aren't low income that can qualify for the tax credit developments or a voucher, but also though they're those who they can't afford the market rents. They fall into that moderate to middle income category. Who there are a lot of city workers that fall into this category. Are that need a place to call home. So we're doing this as a test case to make a success out of it. It's very difficult because there's not a lot of funding available for a project of this type. There's tax credits and other funding sources for building the capital A affordable housing for low income. And you can for market rate, you can set your rents to um, to offset what that debt service is going to be for building a market rate development. But for this, we're kind of squeezed in with we're going to set the rents at a level that's affordable to moderate income households, but the construction costs are going to be pretty high on it. So right now we're struggling with putting together the funding sources, the capital stack, and we're looking at some bonds for this project mixed in with with just conventional financing, but we're going to make it work. And some of that gap financing might have to come from the housing authority reserves because we want to make this work. We desperately need this type of housing for moderate income households
Yeah,
that also don't qualify for the capital A affordable housing.
right. Was this the one where there was sort of a invisible investor or quiet investor at some point? Is that person still involved?
They are not involved, and because of the costs, we have our entitlements. We're probably going to be ready, have a building permit ready this summer, but it's taken so long, and the whole world's changed with the interest rate environments on investments that the way the rental revenue coming in with restricting the rents, it really isn't meeting the that even with that yield that the investor needed, even at the lower yield.
Yeah.
So that's why we're looking at alternative capital funding structures for it right now. But we are absolutely committed to making this work.
Is there a timeline, a new timeline on this, or what's it looking like?
We're working hard right now on with different funding sources to be ready to go this summer or early fall to begin construction. But we
Okay.
have to have that all lined up, before we break ground. We
And just to be clear, these are all separate pools of money. So Section 8 voucher money is not on hold to find reserve fund. That's entirely different
no,
things, right? Okay.
yes, yeah,
That project's an amazing project when it's built. We know about the history, the controversy in the neighborhood, but after it was redone and repitched, like the neighborhood was on board. And I think
yeah,
everyone is really looking forward to having this type of housing for this demographic in the community because in Santa Barbara, you could have a good income, decent income. Anywhere else in the world, it's amazing income. Here, it's not really much, right? You're not poor,
right,
you're not rich, you're right in the middle. And
right.
being right in the middle in Santa Barbara from a housing perspective can also be a very lonely place. So
That's right.
that's awesome development there. We have just about 5 more minutes or so, Rob. I know you're working on a ton of other projects. Can you give us kind of some rundown highlights of things you're excited about?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm also very excited about our Parma School
Oh
development.
yeah,
The school district's Parma School site over on the east side on Montecito Street, right across from Trader Joe's on Montecito Street.
yeah,
It's an unused site by the school district right now, and they have issues of hiring and retaining their own employees because of the high cost of housing.
yeah,
So we're partnering with them to create school district employee housing at that site. 30 units. Again, this is large family units because we've done surveys with the school district, and there's a need for serving school district employee families there.
yeah,
So that's what we're doing. But there's also this project would work under a tax credit development, and that's the funding source we're going after for that development as well.
yeah.
And we've
So
submitted.
on that project, uh, there's obviously a lot of controversy right now with the school district related to its annual layoff notices and cuts and all of that. Do you envision that project to be for teachers and staff, or could a high-end administrator have one of those units, or you can't
Probably
discriminate
not the
like that?
high-end administrators because it's going to be tax credits, so it's going
Yeah,
to be more serving your teachers and your classified staff,
right.
those
Okay.
who are not teachers. But it'll be both for teachers and classified staff who are income qualified. So
Right. And the teachers, and the staff need that stuff the most. Is there a timeline on that? Nothing's happening now, right? But it's in the
well, we're going through the entitlement process. We've submitted an application to the city, and that takes like about a year to get through all of that stuff. And then once we have that, we finish up the working drawings and submit our application to the state for funding of
Mm.
it. So we're probably looking, unfortunately, it takes way too long, all this stuff. We're probably looking 2 years out
Yeah.
to be under construction on it. Maybe a year and a half out
And this is
to
a
begin.
first, right? Is the housing authority and the school district partnered before in any way?
Yeah, we have not.
Yeah.
This is a first. I'm really excited about it because if this is something we can make work, the school district has other sites as well. And if we can make that property behind us work, behind me, Jacaranda Court, and show that as a success with funding sources for that moderate income band, perhaps we can do a mixed type of development with part of the development being tax credits and the other half serving that little higher income bracket for teachers that that wouldn't qualify for tax credits if their income is higher, but they still need an affordable place to call home. So
Right.
lots of possibilities with different school district land that's available, but we want to use Parma School as a test case to show the community that this can be done. And a couple other things before we run out of time is, because we're a built out community, we're looking inward at our own developments because we don't have land to just keep building. So we're looking at some of our older developments that were built in the early 70s
Mm.
at that exists at this kind of sparsely built looking at today's standards in terms of density. We're not taking advantage of the property that's there. Like Presidio Springs, right across from my office on Laguna Street, is
Oh,
122 units currently of senior housing. We plan to phase that in over that redevelopment over probably 10 years, but we're going to build 300 units there.
wow.
We're going to double the number of units that are there for seniors, more senior housing that's needed. Monteria Village, same thing. It's right below, it's on the corner of Rancheria Street and Montecito Streets,
Hmm.
down below City College. We're going to take that from 28 family units up to 52 family units.
Mm.
So uh, Monterey is getting pretty close to getting done with its entitlements to the city. So I think that'll be next up after 15 South Hope for actually getting out under construction. And then long term, we have Grace Village 2, which is right behind our Grace Village on the other side of La Cumbra Plaza.
Mm.
We're planning to build 40 units there, but we can't start that until 2032 because of some lease agreements that are in place. But
Okay. So, hey, Rob.
long-term planning,
Well, yeah, we're still going to need the housing then. Um,
yeah.
Rob, when you mentioned the Presidio Springs and the other development near Rancheria Street near City College,
Mhm.
are you able to build and remodel and redevelop without evicting tenants? It sounds like that's a huge transformation there, but I didn't hear you say
Don't
tenants would have to leave the space.
don't worry, we're not going to rent evict. Uh, it does require us to temporarily move families at the time, but that's why we plan in the future. Like Monteria, we're leaving a few units vacant now as they become vacant, so that when we're ready to rebuild the site, there's not a lot of temporary relocation. And luckily, the way we're phasing Presidio Springs, we have pods of existing senior units there at Presidio Springs, buildings. Like one building is a set of 10 units. We're going to demolish that 10 unit building and build 40 units where there are now 10 units. So those 10 units, that first set of 10 units, again, this we're probably not going to be building there on those 10 units for 3 or 4 years, but that's for any units that become available on site separately from those 10 units. That's where we will move people from those 10 units to the other vacant units that become available on site. And so that first pod is 10 units is vacant by the time we get under construction, and we can build and then have those residents move back to a new unit when it's built, and then have those, have and then begin the other phases. So it's we're trying to do it with minimal displacement. But I met with the residents for, before we had a community meeting the other night. But before that, last month, I met with all the residents of Presidio Springs to go over these plans and to take their input. And I let them know my commitment to them is that minimal displacement, there will be disruptions and whatnot where they'll be unhappy for a while, but that they have the right of return, and they're always protected with paying just 30% of their income for rent, the way this structure is, just like they're paying now.
Yeah.
So it's not a rent eviction, and we tried again to minimize temporary moves. We did that up at Shifco on the Mesa a few years ago when we rehabbed that entire property. We had to temporarily move people out from one building to another, rehab that building, and move them back in to their rehabbed unit. And they're quite pleased after they get their new unit with, it's more soundproof,
Mhm.
better energy efficiency, better heating, cooling systems. Um, Typically, our residents are happier after all said and done with the new development. But not to be, I don't want to sugarcoat it. I mean, redevelopment's hard on the residents. I know that, but we're trying to minimize those impacts.
Yeah, that's great, Rob. Maybe some of those alleged renovictors should sit down and talk with you and see how you're able to do it.
Yeah.
Rob Fredericks, I really appreciate your time educating the audience and me about all the important work you're doing in the community. So, look forward to talking to you again down the road. Have a great
All
day.
right. Thanks. You too, Josh.